You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, part of the Rivals.com network, representing CanesCounty.com. Make sure you subscribe to CanesCounty.com for free. Use the promo code Miami30. And also make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all platforms, as well as subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Today, this is our series, Scouting the Opponent. And this week, Miami will host Bethune-Cookman this week. And today, I'm joined by Chris Vinel, who writes for the Daytona Beach News-Journal. And thank you for joining me today, Chris.
Absolutely, Marcus. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And Chris covers the team. He also covers high school football. So we'll get into a little of both on this podcast. But first off, I kind of wanted to start with, just the controversy that was going on with Bethune and one of Miami's famed alums in Ed Reed. This past off season, he took the job and then, mysteriously, I guess, left the job. From your perspective, you've been covering the team for over a year. From your perspective, just kind of what happened with Ed Reed and that whole coaching situation?
Yeah, it was kind of just a weird situation, like you said. Terry Sims was the former coach at Bethune-Cookman. He went 2-9 his last 2 years there, their first 2 seasons in the SWAC conference. And so they let him go, and took about a month. And it was, typically coach leaves and you have a new coach within, 2 weeks. The current day landscape of college football where everyone's rushing around to get recruits and whatever. Well, Bethune-Cookman took, 3 weeks goes by, 4 weeks goes by. The end of December comes around, and finally they announced that they've landed this big fish. They've got Ed Reed, and the term they used was they had an agreement in principle. And so they announced that. January starts, and Ed Reed arrives in Daytona Beach and, starts kind of meeting with the team or organizing different, they were cleaning up around campus and that sort of thing. And all the while, they still have not finalized the contract details. They're still, it's pretty much there. They've agreed this is going to happen, but they've got to dot the I's and cross the T's. And then Ed Reed goes on social media and he criticizes the university and,
Right.
Talks about some of the problems that he's noticed. He called the administrators, he said they had broken mentalities. And the university just didn't take too kind to that. And they said, Ed, we can't be doing this. And so they pretty much said, we're not going to finalize that contract. And that was maybe 3 weeks after they had initially announced the deal. And so Ed Reed was out, and he kind of, publicly campaigned to get his job back. The players at BCU, everyone that I talked to at least, kind of supported Ed Reed in that. There was protests on campus, not necessarily about Ed Reed not getting officially hired, but just about some of the things that he brought up, some conditions on campus after the Hurricanes last year, and just some different things that they had noticed. And so he kind of affected some change in a short time there. There were some things that they cleaned up. And then about 2 weeks after that, they hired Raymond Woodie, who's been a Willie Taggart disciple. This is his first season as head coach, and he's actually a Bethune-Cookman alum. So they kind of went with a less flashy route there. Still someone who, the fan base can get behind, especially with him being an alum. But they were really hoping that Ed Reed was kind of that guy to do what Deion Sanders really did at Jackson State, bring some headlines and bring some money and some fans and just some success back to the program.
Yeah, absolutely. An odd situation, to say the least, that, it made headlines nationally. And of course, it made headlines down here in South Florida. So glad to hear that Bethune has cleaned up some things and things are kind of headed in the right direction. But yeah, you alluded to Coach Woodie getting the job. This is a guy, like you said, from the Taggart tree, but also coached with Mario Cristobal out at Oregon. So they are familiar with each other. What are your impressions of him so far?
He's kind of a no-nonsense guy. He came in and immediately he started saying, hey, we're going to put all this offseason behind us, the tumultuous kind of Ed Reed situation. That's over. And the 2-9 seasons, those are over. Those are over and done with. Brought in a whole new staff. He brought in, I believe the final number was something like 51 new players with transfers in the incoming freshman class coming in just since the spring game. So that 70-13 loss that Bethune-Cookman had to Miami last year, if Miami fans remember that Bethune-Cookman or any players from that team, they're probably gone because it's just a very different looking Bethune-Cookman team. But yeah, he's been preaching kind of accountability and unity. His big thing was when they got to fall camp this year, he said that everyone who wears a single-digit jersey number, those are all up for grabs. No one's locked in, and you're going to have to compete for it, and you're going to have to earn it. Now, some of the guys, their best players who were wearing, number 1 or number 5 or 6, what have you, last year, they did earn those numbers back right away. But yeah, everyone else, it was up for competition, and it led to guys like quarterbacks wearing number 39 in practice and different things like that. So just kind of a unique thing there, but he's really trying to promote unity and kind of competition, and I'm sure we'll get into their quarterback situation, but that's kind of the epitome of what he wants is just a quote battle, every day in practice and before games.
Sounds very similar to what's going down here in Miami. The Hurricanes coaching staff is really encouraging competition, and it's really showing on the field, and I'm sure it would also show on the field for Bethune this season. But let's talk about what you've seen on the field so far from the Wildcats. They, started out, with a tough loss to Memphis, 56-14, but, they bounced back pretty strongly against Savannah State. Big difference in competition between the two schools. So obviously a big difference in the two scores for week 1 and 2. But as far as the offense is concerned, what should Miami expect from this Wildcat offense?
It's funny you asked that because it kind of depends. And I know that's not a great answer, but they've played 2 quarterbacks in each of their first 2 games. Walter Simmons III has been their starter in the first 2 games. He played almost that entire Memphis season opener and wasn't very effective. But he's a guy who really has dual threat capability. They run a lot of RPO, a lot of option stuff with him. Everything's out of the shotgun, and they're more run heavy than pass heavy. And then in the fourth quarter against Memphis, and then in the second quarter last week, they put in Luke Sprague, who's he was one of the top JUCO quarterbacks in the country last year at Nassau Community College. He's a brand new transfer in, and he's really not a threat at all with his legs. He's pretty stationary, but he's come in both those ball games and shown really good accuracy and really good, field perception, field awareness. And so he's been really effective. And he was the guy who finished the game, played the last 3 quarters last week. And we asked, Coach Woodie after the game if the job was his, and he said, not so fast. He said that it's still going to be a battle, and that both those guys know that, whoever shines the most in practice and is playing the best, they're going to play. And you got to earn it. And then once you earn it, you got to keep it. Raymond Woodie's been big on that too, is not only earning your spot, but then keeping your spot, because one of the things he keeps telling his team is that people want my job. People are coming after my job, and I'm going to recruit guys to come after your job. That's the way we want it to be. So kind of a different looking offense in terms of Sprague takes away your quarterback's legs a little bit. I would imagine that he was just so much more effective against Savannah State that I would imagine you'll probably see more of him than you see Walter Simmons III come this Thursday. But I don't completely know, to be honest with you.
I guess we'll find out on Thursday night. But it seems like they possibly could use 2 quarterbacks on Thursday. You think?
Yeah, I would not be shocked at all, since that's what they've done in the first 2 games. If one guy's got the hot hand, if the starter doesn't have it, then I wouldn't be shocked if they go to the other guy and see what he's got. And plus, it's just a good experience. I I don't think you can expect if you're Bethune-Cookman to go down to Miami and pull an upset. I think it's one of those experiences where it's just a good experience to see competition of that level, to play on that field in front of those fans and against that elite talent. That maybe you can kind of bring some of that with you as they go through their SWAC season that starts here in a couple of weeks.
Sure. Last year, Miami did have some difficulty stopping the running quarterback from Bethune. So I would imagine that they would probably at least try to play a Walter Simmons III in comparison to Luke Sprague. But let's talk about Sprague. I mean, he did take over the job in that game.
Sure.
What have you seen from him, and what has impressed you from Sprague thus far?
Like I said, it's really his accuracy and his awareness. He gets the ball out pretty quickly. He didn't take a sack last week, whereas I believe Walter Simmons III took 2 sacks in just the first quarter last week, and he didn't turn the ball over. And Simmons did in that first quarter. That's what ultimately got him benched, is he threw an interception on his last throw in that first quarter against Savannah State. So they like his decision making. He's quick, he's accurate, he knows where he's going with the football, and that's all things he showed. Like I said, at Nassau Community College last year, he's just not a dual threat guy. So they've got a couple of running backs that they use that they'll try to complement Sprague and Simmons with.
Sure.
But they really like him throwing the football, and they seem just more willing to throw the football with him in the game.
Gotcha. And speaking of throwing the football, or the receivers or pass catchers or playmakers that the Wildcats have, which players should Miami be concerned with going into Thursday night's game?
There's a couple of them that they really like. Davino Ellington led the team in catches last week with 6. But Dakari Allen Johnson is their other guy that they really like at receiver. He had 2 touchdowns last week. And so those were the 2 guys that all summer long, that's who they talked about. That's who they really liked, even going back to the spring. And then in the backfield at running back, you'll see a couple of different guys. There's Javensley Basil, who was a Washington State transfer, who's originally from the Naples area. So he transferred back to be closer to home, and he had 2 touchdowns on his first 2 carries last week. And he's kind of a guy that they used more as the game went on, and you can kind of see that he's got it a little bit. Like, he's been there, he's played at Washington State on a higher level,
Right.
and just has that experience. And then the other 2 guys that they'll run out there are Terry Lindsay and Jimmy Robinson. And both of those guys have a little bit of experience. Robinson was kind of their backup last year. He's one of the holdovers from that team. But those are kind of their main playmakers at this point.
It sounds like that guy from Washington State may have played with Francisco Malagoa last season, and I'm pretty sure they'll have a chat or two on the field. But so we talked about the playmakers on offense, and also kind of want to know what's going on with this defense. And, I'm sure there are some guys that are standing out to you. If you could just expand on those guys and what kind of skill sets they bring.
Sure. And this is Raymond Woodie's specialty. This is his side of the ball. He played, linebacker and defensive back in college, and, has really spent most of his time in the coaching ranks on the defensive side of the ball, coaching linebackers or that sort of thing. And so Dearest Thomas led the team in tackles last week with 9. He had a sack and 2 tackles for loss as well. Jalen Christian had a sack and 2 tackles for loss last week. But the 2 guys that kind of really stand out to me are Eddie Walls, who's a defensive lineman, and Omari Hill Robinson. Hill Robinson was one of their 2 all-conference players, coming into the season. And the other one was Darnell Dees, who plays a little bit of defensive back, but he's really just a return guy. So Hill Robinson's kind of their leader on defense. He's been around a while. He's had a lot of success. He's their lockdown corner, and has really been that over the past 2 years. Is just a lockdown number 1 corner. And then Eddie Walls was kind of that riser throughout spring and summer that Raymond Woodie got here and said, "Ooh, this is going to be one of our guys." He had a couple of sacks last year, but he's already off to a really good start this year. They really like his burst. He's disruptive off the edge, and you can kind of move him around a little bit if you want to kick him inside or do different things with him as well. So Eddie Walls and Omari Hill Robinson are kind of the two that I would keep an eye on if you're a Hurricane fan.
Omari Hill Robinson is from down here,
Yeah.
Fort Lauderdale, very close to actually where I live here in Fort Lauderdale, at Dillard. So I'm sure there's some players on our side of the ball that are familiar with him. We've got a ton of DBs that are from the area. So I also did want to talk to you a little bit of high school football and recruiting. Chris Vinel, once again, joining me from the Daytona Beach News-Journal, also covers high school football in the Daytona area. Miami had a couple of guys, local guys from your area, Chris, visit Miami and in LJ McCray and Zavier Mincey. These are two guys that Miami is extremely high on and would love to add them to the 2024 recruiting class. You've seen them plenty, I'm sure, on the high school gridiron on Friday nights. What have you seen from first LJ McCray?
You know how they just say that some guys look a little bit different or look like grown men a lot earlier than other people? This guy's one of them. He's every bit of 5 foot or 6'5", 6'6", 250, 260 pounds. He's going to be an edge rusher in college. He's explosive. He's fast. He kind of manhandles high school offensive linemen at this point while also being quicker than them, which is just kind of a dangerous combination if you're going against him. But he's really exploded the first couple of weeks and, been among the leaders in the area in tackles for loss and sacks. And he's really focusing on defensive end for the first time ever. The last couple of years, he's also played tight end at Mainland and Daytona Beach, and been really good at doing it. Like we did kind of a preseason ranking for each position, the top 3 players at each position. He made the list, of course, as a defensive lineman, but he also made our tight end list just because he's so explosive. And he's still playing a little bit of tight end this year, but he's not practicing there. He's exclusively practicing as a defensive end for the first time because that's where colleges want to see him, and that's where he projects. He's just so big. He's too fast, and he's exactly the kind of guy you want if you're Miami on the edge.
Awesome. Darnell D, I do want to point out all over from the area. He's out of Ely, Pompano Beach down here. So two of the top defensive players for Bethune hail here down in South Florida. But tell me a little about Zavier Mincey. This is a kid who was trending towards Florida for a while. And, there's some thoughts about even Georgia being in the mix. But Miami has kind of put as of late. So interested to hear, what you've seen from him so far on the high school gridiron.
In high school, he pretty much takes half your field and eliminates the opponent's passing offense. He's another lockdown corner who, he's got good speed. He's got just kind of good natural instincts with enough size there also to complement it. And, he's another guy where he's got several schools who are wanting him. He's very highly recruited, like LJ McCray is, and has several SEC schools in on him, or Big Ten schools who are interested, that sort of thing. But he's another guy who's really highly rated as a corner and projects to be really good. And I've seen kind of projections that maybe he moves to safety at the next level, but he can do either. And Nino move around a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I've heard of. Well, I've also heard that he could change to a linebacker position as well. He just has the size and the speed and the strength to do that. Where do you... Awesome. Yeah. And where do you see him kind of as his best position?
I just haven't seen him too much outside of corner. He's really impressed me there, but I do see where people would say, hey, he's probably better as a safety. Just because he can do a lot of different things with his size and speed combo. And like I just say, he tackles really well. And so I can see him being used there a little bit more too at the next level.
Awesome. Lastly, I hate to put you on the spot. I do this with every person I bring on for this segment or this podcast. this week where we at Kings County scout the opponent. But how do you think this game turned out on Thursday as far as the score is concerned, and just how do you think it kind of plays out on the field?
I think it's probably similar to Bethune-Cookman's Week 1 matchup against Memphis. I wouldn't be surprised if you see, a 56-14 type of final, with kind of the new pieces and still a little bit of uncertainty at quarterback. I don't know that Bethune-Cookman's going to be able to move the ball really well on offense. And as you saw last week with Tyler Van Dyke, putting up huge numbers against Texas A&M. If he can do that against Texas A&M, that's a little bit of a talent disparity between them and Bethune-Cookman. And so I don't think he'll have much of an issue moving the ball there either. So it'll be a good experience for Bethune-Cookman. Again, like we saw last year, it's something that they can kind of build on, or it's just a good experience for these players who many of them are from the state of Florida, and I'm sure some of them grew up rooting for Miami too. So kind of a cool experience for them, and something that they can build on and kind of compare themselves against as they go forward.
Absolutely, totally agree. I mean, last year this game ended up a 70-13 final, and I think Miami has improved tremendously from that team. So I expect kind of a similar result here. And, in the second half, I'm sure if the game is out of hand at that point, then we'll see a lot of the young guys, and I would expect Bethune to score some points in that second half. That's Chris Vinel, writer for Daytona Beach News-Journal. Great stuff from you. I really appreciate you coming on with me today, and hopefully we'll see each other at the game and maybe sometime again in the future.
Marcus, thank you so much. This has been a blast, and yeah, anytime I can be of help, you just yell.
I appreciate that. Once again, this is the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to canescounty.com for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Also, subscribe to this podcast on all major platforms, as well as subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Until the next episode.